Vahid, I'll turn the floor over to you. Basically, I think everybody wants to know for your who you are, why you are, and what are you going to do in the position you've got. So the floor is over to you, and then after you finish up, let me know, and we'll take some questions to you. You're on. Thank you.
All very good. I can definitely do that. I do have a short presentation I can go over, but John, based on the conversation you and I had before the meeting officially started, maybe it's best just to introduce myself and open it up to Q&A. And I would say that with the Q&A, for me, what would be beneficial based on what John was saying is really just hearing advice and feedback from you on what you'd like to see. I think what John described is a situation where there hasn't been much interaction with the mayor's office during his term. And really, I mean, would like to hear suggestions from you, with your questions, what your advice would be on how to turn that around. So, John, if it's okay with you, I will skip the presentation and just do an introduction of myself.
Well, let me then, in a sort of a backdoor way, and getting you to do so, let's talk a little about what is your background. I understand you used to be on one of the neighborhood councils. Where did you come? Where did you come from before you got here?
So I'll do the quick introduction. So I want to first thank you, John, Dennis, and even Aaron. Aaron was one of the first ones to reach out to me to invite me to come to your meeting the first month I started, and then just timing wise, it didn't work out. I've lived in the West San Fernando Valley since I was 4 years old. And when my family came from Iran, we lived in Porter Ranch and Granada Hills for most of my life. And I got married and moved to Burbank for 1 year. And the last nearly 7 years, I've lived in Encino. The last 14, from 2006 to the end of 2020, I worked with my brother in equities research. And basically, we worked East Coast hours. So we would get to work at 5 o'clock in the morning and we would be done at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That left a lot of time in the afternoon to be involved in different organizations. So I volunteered for a lot of different nonprofits, served on different boards. I was with the Encino Chamber of Commerce, the United Chambers of Commerce. With the Encino Chamber, I was president for 1 year. United Chambers, I was vice president, was president of the Valley Traffic Division's booster organization, the Valley Traffic Advisory Council. I was on that board for 7 years. I did serve on the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council as a business stakeholder. Our office has been located in Woodland Hills across the street from Taft since October 2010. So that's a very long time. And that's really my background. I've served on a lot of different nonprofit boards. And as I was telling John before the meeting officially started, at the onset of COVID, I've always had a good relationship with the mayor's office, and that's why they appointed me to the Planning Commission in 2017, and I was elected vice president in 2018. And during that entire time, and even before then, when I served on a different commission slot, I always gave them information from what I was hearing from public companies we worked with, and we covered and provided and covered research-wise. And in January of last year, we started hearing about what the issues were with the pandemic. And I was relaying that information to the mayor's office. And by March, early April, they appointed me to a task force for COVID. And I really enjoyed that experience in terms of being able to communicate with the nonprofits I've worked with in the West San Fernando Valley, the chambers of commerces, small businesses, and being a conduit of information. What they were feeling and seeing on the ground wasn't necessarily what the mayor's office was hearing, because the environment is different in the West San Fernando Valley, as John, you were saying, as it is in the rest of the city. And what we needed was different than what other areas of the city needed. So I was basically a conduit in providing that information, getting resources for some of our business organizations. Once that task force ended, I really started to reconsider what I wanted to do. Being a volunteer and having limited time, I didn't feel was enough to really help our valley get back. And this was a conversation I started having with my brother in August. And by the time November rolled around, I reached out to the mayor's office and let them know, look, I don't know what's going to happen. Beginning of the year, I'm taking a leave from work. I'm going to look for other opportunities that I can apply myself more permanently on a full-time basis to help the San Fernando Valley recover and recuperate from the pandemic. Essentially, that meant I would be resigning from the Planning Commission. Their response was, well, we don't have a West Valley area rep. Would you like the position? And I accepted it. I accepted it knowing that over the last 14 years that I have been involved, that the Valley rep has a lot of power and sway that we haven't really seen be used to its full force. And a lot of that is because we have seen individuals come in who it's their first job. It's their first job in government. They're not necessarily from the West San Fernando Valley. They may be from the San Fernando Valley, but have roots just with a small portion of the community. And I felt, I have a broad depth of involvement, and I can just jump right in. And that's really what I've done. I've met with different neighborhood council presidents. I've met with chambers, met with business orgs. I've met with small businesses. I've met with charter schools, just relationships I have built over the years to figure out really what are they really hearing? What are the resources they need? What can I do? And that's really where we're at. And I think that's what I'm looking for is, look, I'm not in this to plan something else. Is when I joined the commission and I intended plan check from the neighborhood council plan check. I said, look, when my term is up as a commissioner, I'm going to be right back sitting over there as a neighborhood council member, a community member. So for me, it's about getting what we can get done now while I'm in this role, so that I'm not sitting on the other side when my time ends and say to myself, I could have done this, I could have done that. And I think we're talking about 2 years in the mayor's terms, which is really the amount of time my brother has given me to keep my seat warm at our business. So there's a lot for me to do, a lot to get accomplished, but not a lot of time to do it. And I know we may not agree, myself and your organization, a lot of things. And I know there are a lot of things you don't agree with the mayor on. But what I can promise you is that I will be an honest person who will come to you with honesty and openness, and take your feedback back to the mayor's office, back to the mayor himself, and share your feedback. And I think more times than not, that's what's more important, is for him to hear what you're saying, and he can take that into his calculations of his decisions that he'd like to make. So with that, I'll just open up for a Q&A.
Well, I think that helps us a great deal too. Are you technically employed by the city?
I am 100% employed by the city.
Right, so we're paying your salary in essence as
Yes.
a city employee. How much are you making a year?
65,000 something, which is less than what I was making before, John.
I understand. We appreciate that for your work on it. And again, I gave you the hard question there on salaries, but it's open to the public, and I want the public to know that that's available. And then we're not afraid to take a look at those things too, and to let you know that we're going to watch everything that's going on concerning your activity here. One of the things we've had in the past is there hasn't been any real outreach going on from the mayor's office, from his representative, or from the mayor in the past decades, frankly, even before this mayor. Do you have an understanding as to why that has occurred? Is the Valley really considered to be a stepchild and is just ignored by the mayor?
I can't speak to why he didn't come to events or accept invitations. I know personally, before this role, I would invite him to events, and when he could make it, he would make it. He would speak to groups like the United Chambers and the Encino Chamber of Commerce when invited.
Well, he certainly came out for the mayor's breakfast every year. That was certainly the big event for him.
Mayor's lunch, yeah.
And that was other than that, we generally did not see him out here, even just walking through some of the areas. Are you finding that there is a different attitude with the mayor's office from what we have in the Valley, from what it has been in the past, or don't you have a background to really see a difference?
I wouldn't have a background to see the difference. I can tell you that the approach and the attitude towards me is, you've always done a lot of stuff. You've always been involved with a lot of different groups. If there are events that he can attend, submit the scheduling requests. And they do take those things seriously. Unfortunately, now because of COVID, it's more limited to the virtual events, and his time is more constrained as the vaccine rollout has been not as easy as we had all hoped it would be.
Would you be able to get him to come to a virtual with us at some point in time?
I definitely could, John, if you send me some details and I can submit a scheduling request and we can figure something out.
We'll take a look at that as well. You mentioned COVID. You were on the COVID task force. Pierce College has just opened up testing and vaccine issues. Did you participate in trying to help get Pierce College as a distributor for that?
No, so that was always in the pipeline because it was a testing site. So there was always, once vaccines were going to be rolled out, that had always been in the queue to take some of the larger testing sites and convert them into vaccination sites.
Yeah, and I understand that's what's going to be going on with Pierce College now at this point. One of the concerns I think a lot of people have had was whether or not the Valley was going to get its fair share, if you will, of the vaccines to begin with. Pierce College and I think Northridge are, and then Handsome Dam, pretty much the only locations here. If you wanted to get it otherwise, you're down to Dodger Stadium. Is that your understanding, that they're now trying to open up more spots out here to be able to make sure the Valley is going to be able to be properly vaccinated?
Well, there's also the Balboa Sports Complex as well.
That's
That
correct.
was one of the first larger ones. I think what we're seeing is the hardest hit communities, and there is a LA Times has a good visualization of it, and I was going to pull it up for you. And what we're seeing is in the hardest hit communities that have the highest cases, they're not getting as vaccinated as much as the areas that have the lowest infection rates. So the focus right now has been on getting these mobile sites, or as they call them, the MOVE teams, out into specific council districts and get mobile vaccinations up on a daily rate. There has been conversations of bringing that in Canoga Park and Reseda. That is something I've been working on, as well as finding future sites that could be done. But again, it goes back to a limited vaccine supply and the focus being on those hardest hit areas with the highest infection rates and making sure that they're getting inoculated I don't think it's going to be at the same rate as areas like Encino and Tarzana, who are very high or leading in some ways the vaccination rates, but just trying to get them as close as possible to those levels.
Has the mayor taken an active role in what's going on here in the Valley area concerning the vaccinations, though?
He has. So the Balboa Sports Complex, that was one of his first public events after his quarantine with COVID. He and Councilmember Nuri Martinez were there for the first vaccine doses. He's been in communications, I believe, with Councilmember Martinez for another mobile unit that's going up in Council District 6 at the Mid-Valley Y next week. There's also additional conversations about bringing it to the Northeast Valley in Council District 7.
I want to turn for a moment to a development that's going on and some of the legislation on things. You were on the Planning Commission for the City of Los Angeles. How long did you were on that? 2017? Is that when you started?
September 2017.
And for those that may not know, describe to us what your role was on that commission. What did that commission do in regards to planning and development, specifically for the Valley?
So the largest thing we did was citywide policy. So whether it was a cannabis sign ordinance, citywide policy like the auxiliary dwelling unit policies that I don't think we ever had the city council officially approve, anything citywide that would have a Valley effect. One of the other things that we had a big part in were appeals. So like the Warner Center Promenade project was appealed. And given its size, the Citywide Planning Commission is the body that hears that appeal. So that's what we really did. It was citywide policy, anything over 50 units in residential dwelling, anything over than 50,000 square feet in commercial, those and appeals come to the Planning Commission.
And then from there, if there's an appeal, it goes on to the city council. Is that fair?
Some appeals don't go to the city council. For example, appeals of the transit-oriented community projects, the Planning Commission is the final decision maker on those.
Well, that brings us really to our first question, actually, concerning that. It's from Chris Rowe. And Chris has given it to me in writing as opposed to her doing it live for this evening. She says, I know Vahid from when he was on when he was a board member of the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council. My question for tonight is this: why did he, as a member of the Planning Commission, support a full 15,000 seat stadium when the original approval for the stadium by the zoning administrator was for a maximum of 7,500 to 10,000 seats? I'm adding that in. He said that I believe that it would stimulate the economy of Warner Center. I have to wonder how many people who live near there support the stadium, let alone an open stadium. Why were you supporting a 15,000 seat stadium at that location?
Officially, I don't even know if I'm allowed to answer those questions now because I'm in this capacity working for the mayor. But let's just assume I'm taking my hat off and I'm answering this question as a private member. I was fairly open with how I came to that decision. I think when I was a part of the Planning Commission and when I advocated for projects, and sometimes I advocated for pulling back projects and pulling back incentives on Valley projects, it was just understanding the Valley from the area that I've grown up in.
I think what the problem was, and it was from us too, as you may or may not know, we worked very, very hard with Westfield on coming up with a special agreement with them that was up and above what the limitations are that have been placed by the Planning Commission and by the City Council. That's been approved by the City Council now at this point. The maximum amount of seat at that location was 10,000 seats. And even with Westfield at that point, they were upset with the commission even considering going to 15,000 seat, because very frankly, it would have probably triggered another EIR if that was to occur. But I was personally shocked with the fact that the Planning Commission was willing to open up and almost give a developer anything and everything that they wanted that was over and above what the community had been advocating for a long period of time, and along with the appeals as well. Is the attitude that was presented by you and by others of that, extending the seating to 15,000 and basically letting the developers do whatever they want to, a pervasive opinion or focus for the mayor as we come into some new issues that'll be coming up? And my next question to you: where does that stand? Is that a prevailing concern for the mayor's office to have whatever development we want, just go ahead and put the development in?
I think a credit to this mayor is that when it comes to his planning commissions, at least that I am aware of personally, is they appoint people to those commission appointments and have full faith and trust that they're making right, smart decisions. There is no, aside from the staff reports that are public information, there is no pressure put on us or input given before meetings. And a lot of it is based on their faith and trust in our opinions, in our thought process. And the EIR, the reason why I had asked for 15,001 was that the EIR had studied up to 15,000. And one of the areas of economic viability is compared to other areas. If you look at where someone goes to a concert in downtown LA or other parts of the city with venues that can hold a crowd size that big, that's a lot of economic activity. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of opportunity that we don't have here in the West San Fernando Valley. In the San Fernando Valley, a population that itself would be in the top 10 cities in America. And I think that the mayor sees it and recognizes Warner Center as a regional center, just like we do Hollywood. And we need to, personally, I see it as we need to find ways to create an economic hub in that regional center that recognizes the Valley as this large area that has so much opportunity and potential to provide people. And John, I would go back to you and say that when you were considering Valley secession, you still need a regional hub. And that's what Warner Center is. And I think there's a lot of untapped economic potential in the Valley. As someone who wants to spend his time in the Valley and not on the other side of the hill, I've always sought for ways that we can bring entertainment, bring sports, bring things that want to keep people here and spend their dollars locally at our small businesses and hire people locally rather than having to get in transportation vehicles and go to other areas and other neighborhoods.
Would you agree with us that there's always a balance that goes on between the economic development as well as the impact that that development is going to have upon the community and upon the quality of life. You have to remember that Woodland Hills, up until the 2035 specific plan, has been sort of a more of a university type of plotted land development with big open spaces and what have you. And we now decided to go to very heavy densities, especially in the commercial area, the downtown area, which is where the promenade is located at, and the new developments that will go on there. Don't you agree that we have to be careful about that balance between things becoming too large, too quick, and to where we're not giving that type of support to the local community for them to have a good continuing quality of life?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think I've said this many times before when I was a commissioner on the record that the first place I started when we got our meeting packets was in public comment, just to get a sense of what the community was feeling and saying. But as a citywide planning commissioner, we're also looking at a larger scope. So I would start with what the immediate local thoughts and impact would be and trying to put that into a larger vision, right? So we can't, oftentimes we had situations where someone was against a project just locally, but it didn't fit into a citywide or more regional vision for what would work. And I was on the opposite side of that and with the community on some of those projects too, because I could see how it had a harmful impact.
Well, let's follow that through. Are you now, can we consider you to be our advocate to the mayor's office on positions that we have here and needs that we have here in our community? Do you see that as one of your major roles?
I think that is one of my largest roles now. That's why I said it's different being a commissioner than being a representative for the mayor's office. My job now is to be a representative, not just of the mayor's office, but constituents in the city of Los Angeles as well.
Well, that's our concern, is whether or not you're there to pump out the mayor's prophecies as to what things should be done, or rather that you're here to find out what the community really needs and to make sure the mayor understands that and understands the impact of what the community is really in need of.
It's a two-way street. So like I said at the beginning of my prepared remarks, is I'm looking for feedback on ways to improve the relationship. I'm looking for feedback on how we can take the information that you provide to me back and effectively have the mayor utilize it. Like, I'm not going to make decisions for the mayor, and he makes his own decisions. But what I can do is take the information and make sure that he has as much information from organizations in the West San Fernando Valley, like who
are the things that are sitting presently that you're concerned with in the valley that you want to make sure the mayor understands and knows as we go forward? Are the things that you're working on presently?
What I've been working on is small business outreach, especially on business resources to communities that are not English as a first language, and micro businesses. Those businesses types, those small businesses have struggled in accessing PPP. They've struggled in surviving through COVID. Just finding ways to reach them has been a personal goal of mine the last 2 months, and how to reach out to them, how to get information to them, how to communicate with them and figure out if the resources that the city has made available, if those even are sufficient. And I think that's been one of the struggles as we've talked is just because the city has, or a government entity puts out a program, doesn't necessarily mean it's a fit for one constituency. So it's taking that feedback and saying, look, this is good, except here's where it can be improved to help these individuals and organizations, and vice versa. This is bad. This is how it hurts these organizations.
Well, that's good. I think we're, from a homeowners organization out here, we're as concerned about the developments and what's going on. Aaron, there's actually a question in the Q&A. If you could read that, I think that might be appropriate to come up with for right now, and then we'll dovetail that into something else on some of the legislation that's going on.
Yeah, good timing for this question. Any news on what's happening with the Woodland Hills Country Club?
Are you aware of that situation?
I don't have any information on it. Any local projects, I don't know if there is a case number, but
no, there's no case number to it at all. Just so you get a background to it, the Woodland Hills Golf Course has been sold internally, if you will, amongst its members, and they are concerned about what they want to do with it. And of course, the potential is that they would destroy the golf course and turn it into nothing but just residential locations. at that point. And that's a major change in the development that would go on in the Woodland Hills area. There are a number of, having talked with them, there's a number of plans, if you will, that they're looking at, or alternatives they're looking at, very much just in the talking stage at this point. But I'm curious that the with such a large potential piece of property that people are looking at to do something with, that the mayor's office hasn't been contacted about that, or doesn't have any flags up concerning it. Yours are up now at this point, I guess, to know about that, and to perhaps get up to speed as to what's going on concerning that. But nothing is proposed. There's no plans at this point. There's no permits that have been requested. There's no plans have been drawn or anything of that nature. It's just that they're concerned because they're unable to make it economically. Such things as, which you may be able to find some way to help with, the water that they use. They're using city water, which makes, and having to pay city rates on that. And as a result, that monthly expense is huge. There should be some way for the city to make special allotments for something that's of that nature, that has a benefit to all of us in the community, for those type of facilities to have better rates on it, rather than paying the same rates that we do for the city water that comes out of our taps. So again, when you're looking for economic things, it seems like that's where you really want to go. That's probably one of the projects you could really get your teeth into, to find ways of economically allowing them to still be able to be viable in the community, rather than having to destroy something that's been here for decades and decades, ever since I've been in California. So for whatever that's worth to you, to let you know that's going on. But there we are. That does bring us into some of the legislation stuff that goes on. As you know, last year there was SB 1120 that was being proposed. Are you familiar? I'm assuming you're familiar with that from your work with the neighborhood council and planning commission. That was defeated, but just barely at the last minute, literally 1 minute before all the bills had to been done. They didn't have enough time to get it to get it passed, but that will probably come back up again. And basically, for those who haven't looked at SB 1120, it's overly simplified to take away local control of developments and place it really in the hands of the state legislators to decide that we're going to have a cookie cutter that's going to be the same for everybody, no matter where they are. Have you had discussions with the mayor about the local control over land development, and what's going on up in Sacramento, trying to take that away from the city of Los Angeles?
Just on conversations from before with the mayor when it comes to Sacramento bills as it relates to land use. I think the two that are the most controversial locally, he has not taken a position on, and I don't think he took a position on SB 1120. What he's always,
the city council did.
Yeah. What he has always said, that when it comes to Sacramento policies, is that even when he doesn't take a position, he is an advocate for smart planning bills. So whether that promotes a encouragement of building responsibility and safe environments, and he's always pointed to the transit-oriented communities proposal as a foundation of smart planning ordinances. But he has not weighed in on anything in Sacramento.
Has he talked about SB 9 or SB 10 at this point in time in their proposals? Those come up in discussions at all?
I'm sure it's come up in discussions, but not discussions that he would share outside with me, or other than just pondering what he should do.
Is it your impression then that the mayor basically takes a hands-off approach to anything that's going to go up in the state legislature that might affect us here in the community?
I wouldn't say he takes a hands-off approach. I think he communicates, and to the extent to which he feels is responsible. Like you said, the city council does take a position. And I think the mayor sees his role more as trying to help craft smart legislation and not just say yes or no, but to see the process through and see if he can be a part of helping craft smart legislation. But I don't think on these two bills up there now that he has taken any much of a position on it.
Heath Coyne, I see that you've got your hand up. I'm gonna make an attempt to see if we can get you unmuted. You might be able to unmute yourself if you still have a question.
Hi, do you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
All right.
Heath, this is the first time we've tried to get somebody else out to see how this is going to work.
All
Keep the
right.
questions to the point and no
Sure.
running around without any clothes on.
All right. Good evening, Vahid. It's great to see you in this role. Knowing your background, I think you'll do a good job representing the Valley, and I hold out hope that we'll actually have a rep that will advocate and understands the Valley. My question is, do you know what the mayor is doing to attract the high-paying technology jobs of tomorrow to the Warner Center area? You know, as someone who grew up in the Valley, like you, I remember all the high-paying aerospace jobs, the electronic technology jobs, and they're not here anymore. And what are we going to do to have our next generations want to return to the West Valley and, you know, have those jobs? They've gone off and got their, you know, great degrees and everything, but they don't see job opportunities in the West Valley, let alone the kind of activity and transportation that they want, that they see in other cities. So what's the mayor doing to make the West Valley that economic hub that it once was going forward? Thanks.
Thank you.
So the mayor, it's good to hear from you, Heath, and I hope to meet your expectations and surpass them, actually. But the mayor has an active Office of Economic Development, and the deputy mayor for that one is Billy Chun, who actually oversees the planning department. So I'm very familiar with his work. And every time I had a meeting with Billy in his office, he has a whiteboard. And, you know, I would always spy on the whiteboard, because on the whiteboard, he has a list of these large tech companies that he is trying to engage and to bring them to the city. The challenge with the city of LA is we don't offer the same perks as, you know, other cities do. If you look at the economic incentives that Amazon received for their HQ2, I mean, that's not something the city of LA would offer. Just like any major large city, we just don't have the means for it. One. Two, there are other incentives that we can offer in terms of local talent, local knowledge base. And that's what the economic development team has been focused on, is engaging these companies. And it has paid off. There have been Coffee Bean move their headquarters outside of Culver City. I think we approved that project when I was on the planning commission. In terms of the West Valley, though, there's Blackline, which is has high paying tech jobs in Warner Center. There's other opportunities too, but I think the challenge falls on, where can the mayor overstep a council member, right? I think that one of the pieces we're missing in our conversations here tonight is, especially when it comes to like planning and land use issues, the mayor is not going to step in and weigh in on an item over local land use or local incentives ahead of a council member. So it's getting to the table with Councilmember Blumenfield and figuring out how things can work out and be a collaborative effort. In terms of high-paying tech jobs, I know, like as you had mentioned, John, Brad Rosenheim is working on something to bring a high-paying tech sector similar to Silicon Beach to Warner Center. And I do believe he has been working with the Mayor's Office of Economic Development and having a liaison to help navigate how to facilitate recruiting businesses and keeping businesses in Warner Center.
Aaron, there's a pending question in the chat that's actually come from Dennis. I think that might dovetail on that, if you want to bring that to Vahid.
You
Sure.
want me to do it? I'm sorry.
Dennis, I think you should do it because it's.
Sure, I'll
Go ahead.
say it.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So, there's been an issue. You know, we're on the border of Los Angeles here in the West Valley.
You're locked up on us, Dennis.
And a lot of the jobs go out. They don't come over by us, and they don't come to Warner Center. In fact, they go to Burbank. They go to other places, right? Glendale, Culver City. And one of the culprits of that we've always talked about was the gross receipts tax. these other places don't have that. I work in Santa Monica and just over the border from Los Angeles, and we don't pay a gross receipts tax at my office. You know, to help Warner Center survive and to thrive, or Ventura Boulevard, you know, is there anything we can do? And maybe you don't have the answer tonight, but I'm planting a seed about getting the gross receipts tax reduced or having incentive zone.
Locked up again, Dennis.
No, anyway.
So I would first start off saying, as a business owner, Dennis, I can totally relate with the gross receipt tax. And when my brother and I first started out, we were in Tarzana and what is now the Whole Foods, and we were month to month paying 60 cents a square foot in something that we knew was going to be torn down. And then we moved to San Fernando for 3 years because the rent was cheaper. And when we wanted to move out of that office, we were considering Woodland Hills, Encino, and Burbank. For what you've just stated is that Burbank had no gross receipt tax. And for us, that's a huge savings. We ultimately decided to stay in the Valley and move to Woodland Hills because the building type that we were looking for and the amenities we were looking for, we couldn't find in Burbank. So that's one. Two is, I feel like we in the Valley, we talk about the gross receipt tax a lot. When I was first started out being involved with Chambers in 2007, it was an issue that came up. Then we had I don't remember if it was this mayor or if it was towards the end of Villaraigosa's term, but I remember Mitch Englander and another council member led the effort to exclude car dealerships from the gross receipt tax. So we've always undertaken this, but I don't think we've ever submitted an actual proposal on how it would work. And I think now is the time where it becomes a little bit more complex when the city is facing a budget shortfall that I think now is what, $750 million. I think it takes more than talking about it. I think it takes a collective voice of small business organizations, homeowners organizations, to present something that says, if you repeal the gross receipt tax, even if it's just Ventura Boulevard, even if it's just Warner Center, whatever, wherever it is, or it could be just citywide, how would you replace that money? How would you replace that revenue? Because you still have to meet the services that require that revenue contribution. And I think that's where the work starts, is figuring out who's going to do the work, to do the research, to figure out where is that money going to be replaced, or what services would need to be cut.
Well, there was previously a plan, if you will, by this is post-secession movement, by Hertzberg for us to go back to a borough type of system, to where the individual council members had
It's a
greater control.
I don't even know what the brand is. Like some weird.
Hang on, Armin, good, mute you out. There was a movement towards the borough system, and the one of the major intents of that was to give more control to the city council member from that particular district. It would seem that with the gross receipts tax, that if each individual council member had the abilities to decide if there was going to be a granting of a relief from certain taxes in that community, that would be probably a better way to do it, and recognizing that whatever was cut from that, he was going to have to find, or she would have to find a way to make it up in some of the location for what's needed for that particular district. And you know, there needs to be something done to give some stimulants to people that are out there. And what the solution is going to be kind of a bit of a problem. Question to you from Jack Hemperville. Jack points out that the budget deficit is a function basically of lower revenues resulting from the impact from COVID-19, likely in the range of about $700 to $800 million, he claims. Financing the unsustainability of labor agreements, some $228 million that were approved in October of 2019, and increased pension contributions, that's about $127 million. The city is looking at a budget deficit of over $1 billion next year, beginning on July 1. How does the mayor propose to balance the budget? Do they expect to have layoffs and furloughs?
I think one of those is labor renegotiations. We saw that just recently with the police department willing to come back to the table and renegotiate their labor agreement and push back some pay raises. You've seen it in the cut of services in terms of just recently the Department of Sanitation facing budget cuts. City employees had a furlough day the Friday of President's Day, which was an unpaid day. And there's another one scheduled, I believe it's the Friday for Memorial Day is another unpaid day. So yes, labor concessions is one area. You're going to see services cut. I think the hope is that the federal government and the state and the county come back with packages that do reimburse some of the COVID related expenses, and that should help absorb a lot of the budget deficits. I think that's the primary goal. And I would say to Jack, I mean, I know it's a tough conversation, but I mean, Jack, if you have suggestions and documentations and anything I can forward, I'm sure you have those relationships with the mayor's office and you probably send them along, but I'd be happy to take a look at them and see and bringing them up in meetings when appropriate as well.
Board members, Marty, you have any questions at this point?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Right.
I'd like to go to a couple of different areas. Can you hear me, by the way?
Okay.
Yes.
Because I know COVID and there's a few other things, and the homeless. That's top of mind with everybody. But something that we all have to bear in mind is, sooner or later, hopefully it's later, we're going to get hit with earthquake. And are we ready? What is the mayor doing to prepare the city and the city structures like the water system, the electrical system? What is he doing to prepare this city for a major quake event that could strike? And considering that every year our pipes seem to be decaying, and we've got major water breaks happening, and we're putting more and more pressure on our electrical grid units because we're using more and more electrical vehicles, electrical gadgets, whatever. What is the mayor doing about that?
That's actually a really good question. It's something that had come up several times before I came into this role. And one area that oftentimes the mayor has brought up on how to prepare for an earthquake in terms of loss of power and loss of functionality is sustainability programs and his Green New Deal proposal, in terms of finding a way to diversify the power grid away from fossil energy, so it's more renewable and less of a energy source that could fail during a catastrophe, and sustainability measures that could reduce water use and save water use to put less pressure on those pipes. That's been the significant focus, and I think COVID interrupted that. I am one of the Green New Deal liaisons, and it's about getting small businesses engaged on how to take advantage of the Green New Deal economy while also making green improvements to their facilities. And sustainability, I personally do believe, is one way to make sure that there's resilience in times of catastrophe.
Aaron, any questions?
I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, very good.
I got the impression Marty had maybe another question. I wasn't sure, but he made it sound like he
Oh,
had
Marty, you've got some more questions. Happy to have them. Please come on.
Okay, Dennis, finish what you were saying.
Oh no, that was it. I was saying that I noticed that you had mentioned that you had multiple questions, Marty. So.
Yeah, I had a whole bunch. As far as the energy, the base energy. Oh, let me go back to the water, because the water does concern me. It's not just saving water. How what is the mayor's plans for replacement of a water system that in many parts of the city is 100 years old? Has he got anything on the plate?
I think what you're talking about is something that's under the DWP purview. And I will ask, it has not come up recently. I know I've had briefings with the DWP, Marty, but I'll put my email in the chat. If you just email me, so I have your email address and I can see what I can find out for you specific to water infrastructure.
Okay. Let's go to something that's even more top of mind, and that is the homeless issue. By any stretch of the imagination, the homeless issue, and I think you'd have to agree, has gotten more and more egregious every year that the mayor has been in office. It doesn't seem like there's really a cohesive plan to deal with it. You've got a bunch of the council people trying to deal with it in each of their districts as best they can. But so far, I really haven't heard anything come out of Mayor Garcetti about how to handle this thing in a cohesive and logical and forceful way so that we don't have 55 million different groups pushing in 55 different directions. I mean, I know he's set up a whole bunch of departments and coalitions, etc., but nobody seems to be able to. It's 50 mice running around wild, and nobody seems to have a grand master plan. And I would expect the mayor to be the person who has that. Why doesn't he have one as we speak?
I would actually challenge you on that. I think the mayor has laid out a great master plan on how to solve homelessness. It's just taking more time. And I think that the homelessness and crisis has been a national story. It is not just an LA story or a California story. We've seen this crisis explode across the country. And I think the one area where the mayor presented a master plan was a bridge home, which would provide bridge housing in each council district. And not all the council districts took that up. I believe there are just 3 west of the 405. So as we talk about how to provide assistance and how to do our part, I think the mayor has laid out a great plan. It's just about bringing stakeholders on board to implement it. Another area of, that is often overlooked because it's taken so long, and the criticism is correct that it has taken so long, is Measure HHH funding, which although it has taken a long time than planned to come to fruition, it's still 111 projects, and I had the number somewhere. There are 7 projects in service now with 489 units, but there's only, again, 3 west of the 405. So in our communities, we're not seeing the visible improvement more so than other areas in the city because our stakeholders have not necessarily bought into the mayor's vision or put pressure on their council members to buy into the mayor's vision and what the rest of the city is pursuing. And granted that it's visibly worse, I think the mayor has laid out very strong plans on how to do our best to make it less. Project Room Key is another one where I think we just added 100 tonight. He announced 133 additional rooms, but those were in Skid Row. I think it takes, if you have suggestions, Marty, I mean, like I said, you can email them to me and I can definitely bring them up at meetings, but it comes down to, does the West San Fernando Valley want to participate in the policy ideas of the city council with the leadership of the mayor have instituted?
Aaron, there's a couple of questions that are very similar to this that are down there. I think it's the last 3. That might be helpful for an answer at this point?
Is
Yeah,
Aaron
sorry
on?
about that. Oh, they just must have all come in at once. So I'm reading them. I'm reading them live. So I didn't.
It should be, I think the last three are, 3, 4, and 5, I think,
Okay.
having to do with the homeless issue.
The homeless issue. Let's see. Hold up. Please discuss what arrangements are provided for people living in RVs, campers, and cars so they can be moved from the streets.
Who's that from?
And that's from Judith Fisher.
Oh, sorry about that. So it is not illegal for someone to live in their car, and that has to be said. So the issue becomes in areas of how do you get them services. So if you use 211 or la-hop.org, you can let the county service providers know that there is a homeless individual in your neighborhood or in your area who is living in an RV, and you can give a good description, and they will schedule to send a service provider out. And it could be that this person needs help with getting a job, getting housing, getting sheltered. And that's what LA HOP and the county service providers can do. So that is one area in terms of RV housing.
Marty, going back to you, do you have some more questions?
Not at this time.
There are a few more here now, John, that I see.
Okay, yeah,
Do you want me to just go down the list?
I didn't want to be interrupting Marty there. Go ahead.
No, no worries. I'll just go down the list here. From Moira Curry. Does Mayor Garcetti have a response to District Attorney Gascon's decision to stop charging many misdemeanors? And what is the mayor's response to Chief Moore's decision to stop sending officers to nonviolent or misdemeanor activity civilian calls?
I can't speak to the Gascon one because the mayor has not spoken about that in terms of the police's decision to send civilian or non-police to misdemeanor calls. I think that goes back to more of the question of his vision for Reimagine LA and how to de-escalate situations so they don't become more violent or escalated than they need to be. I think the mayor has pointed out to a lot of different studies that show there's different ways to policing that is more effective and finding ways to make better use of police officers' time.
Okay, and from Faye Barta, and this is an issue that we've been working closely with, can we learn what the mayor thinks about LAUSD using our vacant school properties, including Collins, Oso, and Highlander and West Hills, instead of being, it's cut off, but being used not for housing the schools for new residents of Woodland Hills and West Hills?
So to clarify what the mayor thinks of,
I read that right off. Does that make sense? So does the mayor have a position on LAUSD basically not using those closed schools for reopening them as school campuses, but using them, selling them off, or using them for other purposes other than schools?
He has not taken a position on vacant school properties and has deferred to the school board on that.
I guess, and is he even aware of this issue? Is he aware that LAUSD is conducting this study and planning on doing this?
He is aware of it, and I'm not sure how many of your group knows, but former LAUSD school board member and president Steve Zimmer is on the mayor's staff and is the local education liaison. So if that is a real major issue and you think, I would encourage you to invite him on to have that conversation.
Well, it sounds good. That's been something that's been on our radar for quite a period of time. And I think that you could certainly recognize that having schools close by the highly developed Werner Center is going to be beneficial to those people coming in, and we're an attractive mechanism to get people to come into that area. And if we don't have those schools, people are going to go other places. And since we're trying to increase the density here, we want to have younger people coming in, school-age children coming in. We need the schools for those. I think you would agree that that's a positive thing for our community. Would you agree?
I would agree, and the mayor would agree. I do remember from the days on the planning commission when we did have projects in the West San Fernando Valley and even across the city, close to schools, the LAUSD would submit public comment on how to improve a project, but it would also point out that there's declining enrollment. So I don't think the increasing enrollment and having more classroom space was an issue that the LAUSD ever brought up in planning process.
Well, we're going to have probably in the thousands, we would expect children coming out here in the next, certainly in the next 10 years. And we really need another school. We have the OSO properties and a couple other properties that are empty at this point. They're just flat land. So we really need to have some new schools out here so that when we do have children coming here, they don't have to be bused to another location, but rather have a school that's close by. And I think that's going to be something that will be, or should be, on your radar. And hopefully you'll find a way to try to get the mayor's ear on that one so that he can talk to Zimmer and some of the others about making sure that we have a good upgrade to our community with what's going to go on with our educational schools. Would you agree to at least take that proposition on?
I can, and I would make a suggestion that when you have school board member Nick Melvoin next month is to bring up how the school district takes up public comment on planning items close to schools, and encourage the school board to be more engaged in those planning processes as well. Because like I said, the mayor and the city, we, even as commissions, we deferred to what public comment was, and we looked at what the school district itself was saying and what data they were providing. So that would be the area to focus on.
Well, you would agree, though, the mayor has got a very strong voice, or should have a strong voice, in how an area is developed so that it becomes much more productive and a better place for the citizens to live. Would you agree?
I would think the mayor would definitely agree with that comment. But again, it goes back to one thing that we're saying, in this Zoom, and what the school district is presenting in terms of enrollment data when it comes to planning determinations.
Well, I think if you were to take a look at the data that we got from them through a Freedom of Information Act, you'd be disappointed in their statistics and how they're going about making those determinations and decisions. But we'll talk more about that to Nick, and we'll bring that to your attention. It should be on your radar to watch for it as well. They're looking at trying to swap properties out to where, for example, the OSO schools would be swapped and given to a developer for another piece of property, might be another part of the city. That developer would not have any longer to do with the LA Unified School District, but would develop that school in whatever way they felt was appropriate. And we'd have to go back through whatever planning is necessary in order to control that. But we lose school is the bottom line. So keep that in mind. We're on top of it at this point, and we would hope that you'd get on top of that as well and provide some support with us to the mayor's office too.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah. Vahid is a planning commissioner, and your planning commission, you guys were really, trying to get affordable housing instituted into projects. And in some ways it was kind of an informal process. If a developer was open, had to be open to negotiation because they were asking for an exception, you had an opportunity. But in some ways there was no policy, for the affordable housing. Is the mayor's office pursuing anything that's more formal besides the fees that are currently, enacted at this point? And in particular, maybe, we're looking at like Warner Center or the surroundings or other areas, and how do you make things more affordable? And there's gentrification issues and things like that. So is there anything brewing at the mayor's office regarding that?
There's nothing brewing other than taking the TOCs in certain community plan areas and folding them into the community plan update. So it would be adjusting the TOC policies, for example, along the orange lines. And I think, Dennis, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to the Southwest Valley Community Plan update. That's really been the focus, is just rolling in that program into the community plan. Other than that, I mean, there's the linkage fee. There's other various tools that have already been passed. I think when you saw the commission take that stance, it was in projects that came in before Measure JJJ and didn't necessarily meet the JJJ standards. That's where you saw the Planning Commission be a little bit more proactive and vocal in what the on-site affordable was going to be. And rarely ever were those in the San Fernando Valley, by the way. I mean, we rarely wade in, and I think Warner Center was the only one, and they had voluntarily negotiated a different idea on affordable housing.
Can I just expand on one thing then? Is there a, where's the linkage fee going, I guess is the question, you know?
I don't remember how it was being spent. I know the department had given us a presentation over the summer on what the amount collected so far was. It was still new, and the sum wasn't, it still hadn't grown to a significant level. I would say that, you know, asking, well, email me, Dennis, and I can see if I can get an updated answer for you, but I know that they do twice a year, the department does give an update to the commission on how that money is being spent. But if you email me, Dennis, I can follow up on it for you as well.
Sure, and just for the people that are participating, you know, the linkage fee is a fee that developers pay to pay for affordable housing, you know, in other areas, but they're paying it to the city. So I just want to explain that. Thank you.
Is the mayor taking any more of an active role? You know, we still have some homeless encampments that are going on. And we note that the Judge Carter is still working on this. Is he interfacing with Judge Carter on what the city is doing with this? Or is that really being left to the city council?
No, he met with Judge Carter, I believe it was earlier this month, in a one-on-one meeting. And, you know, as one of the ideas that was announced after that was using the FEMA dollars, so 100% reimbursement of Project Room Key. I think our focus has been on finding more hotel and motel operators who'd be willing to participate in the program. And we've seen that program works in getting people off living unsheltered and finding a sheltered source of living for them, and then finding a way to transition them out into a more permanent
When you say
sheltered setting.
you're seeing that work, is that statistics here in LA, or are you seeing that from other communities?
I had it somewhere, I think today. So like I said, the 132 people in the last few weeks were just in Skid Row housed. There's 2,100 individuals. I think the county provides data on a weekly basis. And I was looking at that because it was just this week they announced it. So there, as on the county's report, there were 1,528 operational rooms in the city of LA. In the Valley, as of February 22nd, according to the county, there are 310 of 442 rooms were occupied, with 370 individuals residing in those 310 rooms.
So you're finding statistics here in the city of LA that are in the county that are showing success with that program.
Yes.
Fair enough. Aaron, any other questions that are showing up there?
There are a few others. They're going back to the homeless. We may have already addressed, so touch upon this if you want to. From Judith Fisher, please address what the city is doing to more rapidly provide housing for the homeless population, with an emphasis on the Woodland Hills homeless. And in Woodland Hills, there's an encampment in a 2-hour limited parking area. They've been there for months, so I assume Judith would like them moved and hopefully housed.
So the Department of Transport, I'll take the last one first. So the Department of Transportation has an online portal that you can submit cars that they would describe as technically abandoned. So if it's a 2-hour violation, you'd want to use that portal to let them know and file a complaint so they can send someone out. There are rules on exactly how they would address it. So it can't be just that they come one time and the car is there. I believe it's for 72 hours, even if it is a 2-hour zone, unless it's a towaway zone, if they just get ticketed. And that's one. And the second part is, if you are seeing individuals living in these vehicles, like I said earlier, you'd want to contact la-hop.org or 211 and let them know so they can send a service provider so they can be provided alternatives. In terms of bringing additional roomings and housing to the Woodland Hills area, I think we saw a couple of weeks ago, the council member Bob Lumenfield opened his one of the tiny villages, a bridge home project in Canoga Park. I think bringing in more of those would be helpful. Also finding project room key partners in Woodland Hills would be helpful. Again, these are just temporary solutions that just get people sheltered and in direct contact with service providers that can eventually move them into a more permanent solution.
I think,
Shelley,
I mean, oh, go ahead.
Shelley, you've got a question, Shelley, I see. Would you like to do that one live? You have to mute yourself if you want to, though, Shelley.
Sure, yes. I was just wondering, does the mayor support the idea of commandeering hotels for Project Home Key? This is a proposal that has been brought to the city council, and they had the city attorney weigh in on it, and the city attorney came back and said that yes, the mayor does have the ability to do that. Do you know what his position on this is?
I think the mayor himself has made this position that he would rather see hotels and motel operators come forward voluntarily and participate, and that we're not yet at a situation where we'd want to commandeer, using your words, a business. I think that there's still a lot of effort being made to bring operators under a voluntary project room key process.
Any other ones that were there, Aaron?
Well, I just quickly want to follow up on Judith's question on her behalf.
Sure.
Just that, I mean, obviously you made mention of the services that she could call, but I think at the moment those are probably ineffective, and I'm sure she has called many times, and those laws are probably not even being enforced right now. So do you have any other advice for her, or if they're not being enforced, perhaps you can speak to that as well?
I'm trying to find the link so I can put that in the chat for you. I did provide it to somebody else and they used it, and you're correct. They are still doing it. I think those COVID restrictions from before are not necessarily applicable anymore, but that's the link. It does take some time to get them out, again, because of budget cuts. They don't have the same level of staffing hours to send someone out. So it might take a few days, but that's the best way to do it. And they should respond to you right away. There's also a phone number there that you could call it in. With anything that is service oriented with the city, if you're finding a difficulty in getting a response, if you just forward that email to me, it's easier for me to track down something that has a reference number that I can just have the department look into. So if you do submit this, and they should email you with a reference number, and if you see after a few days you're not getting the response that you'd like to get, I'd be more than happy to follow up on it. No surprise to some of you, as you've heard my background, getting answers on planning items that have case numbers and getting resolutions has been a lot easier for me just based on who I have relationships with directly. So happy to do that as well. And I don't know if you have any more other questions, but before time runs out, I would still like to hear feedback on how I can improve the relationship. I mean, it's just one thing to come and answer your questions, but what ideas and suggestions you have on how to improve the working relationship.
Marty, do you have any comments on that? I certainly have some.
No, go ahead, John. I was going to ask you a question on something else, but it's a fair question from Vahid. Go ahead.
Well, I think that it is. I think that the major thing is the interaction, for you to be proactive and making sure you're contacting with us too. We get sometimes swamped in with specific issues. And so two things going on. One is not only for you to be contacting us to find out what our thoughts are, but rather if you see something that's going through the pipeline that's going to have an effect upon us, we would really, really appreciate the fact, and I think it's actually part of your obligation, to give us a heads up. That's not just us, but neighborhood council and the other homeowners groups that are around, so that we can make sure that our constituents understand what's going on. So for example, if the mayor is coming up with a particular program that he wants to institute, but it's not formalized yet, but still in the beginning stages. If you were to let us know about that, we could probably then give you some of that constructive feedback. I think that's probably where it's going to come from more than anything else, as opposed to us being proactive and telling you what the mayor should be doing, because I don't think he's going to listen to that, frankly. If you're telling us what the mayor is planning on doing, he's got some ideas he's working on, I think we can help flesh that out. We had a very interesting conversation with Henry Stern this evening over some of his legislation he wants to do with the open spaces and high fire areas. And he's looking at trying to refine some of the language that's going to go into that particular bill. That's a really good working group to be doing, to be coming to the community and saying, listen, this is what we're interested in doing. What are your ideas on that? As opposed to us coming to him and telling him what he has to be doing, because he sees things that are going on that he needs to be able to correct. I'm sure the mayor does too. And there are pressures on him that we don't really understand. But nonetheless, I'm sure that he's got projects he wants to assist in the West Valley and make the valley better. We need to know about those. And then to get our input to that, I think will be very helpful in that particular process to make sure when the final decisions are made, we've got something that everybody can live with. So that's my comment as to how I think it probably will be the best for you is to be letting us know about those projects and those things the mayor is talking about and thinking about.
John,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let me just add on to that. It would be very, very helpful, Vahid, if you could get us a monthly update on things that are impacting the West Valley. Decisions from the mayor's office, things that he's considering, because there's been no communication with anybody in the West Valley for a number of years about what's going on.
And this is Dennis. I just wanted to add to Marty's just a little bit. It's more or less what he said. And that is, a few years ago, we had a representative showing up at the neighborhood council when I was involved in that from the mayor's office quite a bit. I mean, like every other month, you know, and it seems like that hasn't happened for a long time, Vahid. So we're looking forward to the fact that you're on board and you're very aware of what's going on out here, and opening up communication again with the mayor's office would be a really important thing for us. And like John said at the beginning, in some ways with COVID, it's actually easier for the mayor to actually show up at one of our meetings. You know, Mayor Viragosa showed up at one of our meetings, actually drove out to the Kaiser, and the security was there, and it was a big production and everything, but he showed up and gave us all some time. These days,
Rose up.
Your continued communication with us is really important, but also, you know, every so often it'd be nice to hear from him personally. So anyway.
That's true. Vahid, we'd be happy to give you, if you have the time to it, you know, we do our meetings once a month. Be happy to give you a 5-minute at the beginning of that, just to do a quick overview of things that are going on. This is what's going on in the mayor's office, what's going on out in the valley, and not have to get into a lot of detail and not a long session like we had for this evening, but just to give us an update. That might be something that would be helpful to all of us at that stage, and to get some feedback on that as well. And also, I think the more that we begin to see you and get that interaction with you, the better off that will be as we begin to learn your personality and our personality. That I think we'll be able to have a better communication as time goes on and to get more things done constructively. That's I think the best take I think we can get for this evening.
I agree with you on that. And I wanted to add, as I put it in the chat, I do send out a weekly email. So if you just email me, I will add you to it. And just like anything I do and communicate, it's based on feedback I get. So it's one thing for me to just put something out there, but if it's not useful information for you, then it's a waste of my time just as much as it is a waste of your time. So if you see something in that email that is not necessarily beneficial, but you would like to see something added communication-wise, I can start incorporating that into the weekly updates.
Well, we'll be happy also. We do a newsletter that goes out every month as well. If you wanted to take a small segment of that and have a couple of paragraphs of things doing updates on it, we'd be more than happy to put that in. And again, otherwise we'll cut and paste things out of yours, but we'd rather have you doing something specific for us that you would be directing to the Woodland Hills community, but more than happy to do that as well. So keep that in mind. I think that would be a great way to begin to introduce our members to you that are not necessarily on this evening, but those that receive our emails and receive our newsletters, to let them know who you are and what information, what's going on with the mayor's office through that information. So I think that would be a great way to approach it too.
Thank you.
Anything else? We're getting to the 9 o'clock hour at this point. Do we have any other burning questions we need to get answered at this point? I'm not seeing any at this particular stage to it. I think that Mr. Khorsand, I want to thank you for showing up for this evening and taking on a group here that sometimes can be a bit hostile, it seems like, but we don't want to be that way. That's just, we have issues that show up and have questions that are there and get frustrated with the mayor's office, very frankly. And since you're sort of the front man on that at this point, a lot of it may be directed at you, but unintentionally, it's really directed at the mayor's office. But I think that's going to change in the future. I'm very optimistic about that. So I thank you greatly for that. And hats off to you for taking on this job and for the time that you're going to be spending in the future with us. We deeply appreciate that too. A reminder to our members that we are going to have Nick with us next meeting on March the 24th. We're going to be talking about LA Unified School District, their plans of what they're going to be doing with the OSO schools and some of the other empty properties that are out here, and get a chance to discuss with him what they're going to do about opening up the schools, how that's going to transpire. I think it'll be a very interesting discussion as well. And for those of you who are not members, we ask you to please join up. We need you as part of our membership. Go over to our website, www.whho.com, and you'll find there an application for membership. And that's a good place for you to find out those things are going on in the future. Be aware that the whole conversation tonight has been recorded, and that will be up in a couple of days on YouTube if anybody wants to go back or you want to refer it back to some other individuals as well. Listen, thank you tonight. Vahid, thank you so much for it. We deeply, deeply appreciate it. To those participants that were here tonight, thank you for spending your time with us as well. We hope that you learned something, found out something new, and we'll carry that on and let your neighbors know about that as well. So until next time, we'll say goodnight to you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vahid.